The year is 2018, and the 2b2t community is pretty excited. Since the server had been running the latest version of Minecraft, 1.12.2, for almost a year now, when Mojang finally released the 1.13 aquatic update to the public, it seemed to promise loads of cool new features, and so the 2b2t community started to prepare. Plans for bases were put on hold as chunk trolls would be incredibly easy to see in 1.13 due to the oceans changing, and people frantically tried to load as many pearls as possible to get back to their bases, as in 1.13 all set pearls would be deactivated, and so the player base waited, and waited, and waited. By the turn of the year going into 2019, over 9 months had passed since the initial release of 1.13, and the majority of the 2b2t player base had pretty much lost hope that the server would ever update. That is, until early January of the same year, when the player base finally got some good news. A message appeared on the top of the tab menu stating, "Server is broke, expect lag while it's being fixed. 1.13 soon." And just a couple of weeks after that, a new message appeared stating that not only is the server going to be receiving new hardware along with this update, but confirm that the update will happen in just a month's time in February, and so the player base loaded their pearls again and went back to waiting. Then, in February, when everyone was expecting the server to finally update, a new message appeared saying that 1.13 would now be in March. Okay, another month goes by, and now the message on the tab just says, "coming soon." As you can imagine, the 2b2t players were starting to get pretty annoyed at the server owner for taking so long, and many players began to give up on the possibility that the server would ever update. This was until, on the 1st of April 2019, 1.13 was finally brought to 2b2t, on the April Fool's temp map. Unfortunately though, when the event ended and the server went back to the normal map, nothing had changed and the server was still very much on 1.12.2, and although the server owner had stated that 1.13 was still very possible in the coming weeks, on the 3rd of June 2019, the server admin finally announced that 2b2t would most likely stay on 1.12.2 indefinitely. Coming up to 2 years later, this is still the case, with the server owner having shown little interest in updating since 2019. But why is this? Well, of course there are the hardware and technical limitations, which although have been covered extensively by other YouTubers in the past, I'm still going to have to briefly mention, even though they aren't really the focus of this video. Rather, in this video, I want to talk more so about the circumstances that would have to occur to allow for the server to update, and also, maybe why 2b2t updating may not be as glamorous and amazing as people often make it out to be. So yeah, if you do end up getting some enjoyment from this video, then I'd massively appreciate it if you were to drop a like, and maybe even subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Alright, let's go. Okay, so to first get an idea as to when the server could ever update, I do think it's important to first clarify the main technical reasons which have made it difficult for the server owner to justify updating in the past. And these are A, the insanely long time it would take to transfer a 10TB world file to the new updated 1.13 file system, and B, the fact that on its own without plugins, 1.13 and more recent versions like 1.16 are completely fucked when it comes to lag, and are incredibly unstable compared to 1.12.2. You see, 1.13 introduced an entirely new world generation and also an entirely new filing system for the world save, and the only way to make a world from 1.12.2 to 1.13 playable is to update it to this new file system, and this isn't as simple as just dragging your 10TB hentai folder from your hard drive to an external homework drive, because it needs to process and convert every bit of data chunk by chunk, including entities and chest contents, which all, mind you, is performed on a single CPU thread. If you're wondering how long this would take, then we actually already have a pretty good benchmark for this. I spoke to a guy called ePearl who actually gave me a load of information which has helped me make this video, and he runs and owns his own Anarchy server, endcrystal.me, which after many hard months of work, now runs pretty smoothly on 1.16. He told me that to transfer his 750GB 1.12.2 world to 1.13 took him 2 weeks, and he has even better hardware than 2b2t does. and this is only 7.5% of the size of 2b2t's world, so multiply 2 weeks by 13, it gets you 26.5 weeks, aka about 6 months it would take for 2b2t to transfer the map, which is just completely unrealistic in modern day 2b2t, as a 6-month temp map, although fun, would be incredibly damaging for the server's profitability, which is something we're going to talk about later on in the video. However, if you look at the post the server admin made, which I showed you earlier, you can actually see that he said that the world transfer would no longer be a bottleneck, and there is actually a way he could achieve this. The seemingly obvious thing to do would be to just transfer the chunks as players load them, so slowly over time much of the map would get converted. However, this would be basically impossible, as if a player were to load in a chunk with a bunch of data in it, for example a stash, all the server's performance would instantly be put onto converting that data, and the server would most likely crash. And think about how many stashes there are on 2b2t, most likely thousands, and so unless you want to play on a server that is constantly on a sub 10 TPS that crashes randomly every 20 minutes, then this really isn't the way to go. What House is most likely referring to is the way that he could transfer the map for those 6 months, but keep the server running, but just log all of the chunks that were loaded during those 6 months, and once the main part of the map is finished transferring, just have a small downtime while they transfer all the chunks that have been loaded and paste them into the map world file. I have no idea how this would be done, and it would most likely run the risk of a shit ton of data corruption and funky stuff, but I suppose in theory it could work. Now, in terms of how laggy 1.16 is, this shouldn't really be a limitation, as it is definitely possible to make it incredibly easier to run through the use of plugins and optimizations, which would certainly cost a lot of money, but Housemaster has pretty deep pockets. ePearl, who I mentioned earlier, managed to get 1.16 running incredibly well on his server, and he has spent a couple $1,000s to do so, which, to Housemaster, really shouldn't be a huge amount of money. So that begs the question, why hasn't 2b2t updated yet? And when will it? Well, try to put yourself in the server owner's shoes. As of right now, in early 2021, 2b2t in terms of popularity on YouTube is getting close to what it was at its all-time high in 2020, with millions of views on YouTube per week, regular queue in the thousands, and priority queue in the hundreds. And so it's pretty safe to say that there is a huge demand for our little autistic block game right now. And so with several thousands of people per month paying their $20 to Housemaster, what benefit would there even be to updating? In fact, it would be a terrible idea. There is no saying that the hype for 2b2t on YouTube will last forever, and so whoever the server owner is should certainly capitalize on it while it lasts. Shutting the server down for 6 months so that the server can run on a version which requires way more maintenance during a period where there are literally thousands of 12-year-olds waiting in line to give you their $20 is just retarded and sounds pretty counterintuitive. And this isn't me trying to say herder Housemaster man bad like other YouTubers. You can't really blame the guy for not wanting to lose money, and whilst the server updating to a newer version would definitely make quite a few older players return to 2b2t and buy priority queue again, this would be really outweighed by the constant slew of 12-year-olds stealing their mum's credit card to buy priority queue after watching FitMZ for 2 hours. So yeah, in my opinion, I only really see the server ever updating when it's in some kind of downward spiral of losing players, as then maybe the server owner would consider it in order to try and attract some of the old player base, but as of now, with the state that 2b2t is in on YouTube, I really don't see that happening anytime soon, and so we are brought back to yet another situation where 2b2t is seemingly suffering from its own success. If you want to get an idea as to when 2b2t could die down on YouTube, or just die in general, then I strongly suggest you watch my video on when and why 2b2t could die after you finish this one, as you'll probably find it quite interesting. Anyways, unless the server admin actually managed to somehow bypass this 6-month barrier, and is also able to commission and set up the right plugins to let 1.13 plus versions run smoothly, then really the only time 2b2t will ever update is when it's dying, which, as I said, isn't going to be happening anytime soon. But is this really a bad thing? I mean, controversial opinion I know, but I couldn't really give a shit if the server were to stay on 1.12.2 forever, and this is because, well, I don't play 2b2t because it's Minecraft, I play 2b2t because it's 2b2t. Minecraft as a game really doesn't excite me, it hasn't for years in fact. The majority of people, including myself, play 2b2t because of the community and the map with all its history. If this weren't the case, then people would just flock to servers like ncrystal.me, or if you want a map with 8 years of history, simpvp.net. These are both great servers which offer pretty much the same anarchy aspect as 2b2t, but on the latest versions, but neither compare to the experience you get when you play 2b, and think for a minute how cancer the server would become once it updates. Sure, Housemaster could certainly make the server playable, but think for a second how long 2b2t has been stuck on 1.12.2. Coming up to around 4 years now, and brand new exploits of all types are frequently still found on the server all the time. Now, think about what jumping several versions that have added countless new features would be like. The floodgates would literally be smashed open. The amount of new working dupes would cripple the server's economy even more than it already is. Countless new crash exploit would quickly be discovered, which would make the server incredibly unplayable for a while, and potentially several new coordinate exploits would arise, which would spell the end for many bases. Overall, it would be a complete and utter clusterfuck, especially to begin with. Of course, as time goes on it would get less and less bad, but if we were still currently discovering exploits in a 4-year-old version of the game, don't think for a second that Housemaster will ever be able to patch everything. On the other side of things though, some of you may love the idea of this as, hey, 2b2t is chaos, right? And yeah, I suppose there isn't anything inherently wrong with that, but personally, I like my block game server to be an actual playable experience. Now of course, at the end of the day, I can definitely see the appeal for 2b2t to update, especially if you're a builder or a solo player. Having new blocks to build with and new features to play with is most certainly a great thing, and this is why many older players have migrated to servers like simpvp, which are hosted on the latest versions, but 1.12.2, whilst old, by all means isn't ancient and still offers plenty of things to do. Although we don't have bees, which is incredibly sad, I know. New versions of the game are really fucking impressive. Another problem though that I could definitely see arising if the server continues to be on 1.12 is the fact that it's going to get harder and harder for the server admin to keep new exploits patched. The benefit of being on the latest version of the game is that your server gets supported by pretty much all the developers of all of the plugins you use. However, for 2b2t, this isn't going to be the case for much longer. Paper Spigot, which 2b2t runs on, dropped its support for 1.12.2 a while ago, and Paper was usually the go-to for patching exploits. As 1.12.2 gets more and more dated, the server admin is going to need to create his own plugins to patch certain game-breaking exploits, and this could cost him a lot of money, so maybe you could even see it as 2b2t in a way is digging its own grave. But I don't know, 2b isn't the only server that's stuck on 1.12.2 at the moment, many others are having the exact same issue, so it will be a long time before 2b2t actually becomes unsustainable because of this, but definitely something to think about. So, what do you think? Do you care if 2b2t never updates, or are you like me and you're not really bothered by it? Be sure to let me know in the comments, I'm pretty interested to see what the general consensus is. And if you have the time, feel free to let me know what you liked or didn't like about this video, as it helps me make better shit in the future. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope you all found this video entertaining and informative and has given you a better idea as to why the server hasn't updated yet and when it is likely to do so, as there often seem to be loads of misconceptions around it. But if you did enjoy the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you were to drop a like, and if you want to see more videos like these, then even consider subscribing, as it helps me get on the good side of YouTube's algorithm, which is always nice. So yeah, have a good rest of your day, see ya.
So would you be surprised to learn there's an underground club where new players are forced to each other barehanded? It might sound harsh, but there's a reason they're The The winners are given high-level gear and shulker boxes. Since this will be my first time at the club, I will be forced to